we continue on our quest to understand people who have locked their identities in a tight box and are not willing to show you what's going on inside. And if you think politics and religion are hidden, it's the whole identity that is hidden. And if you talk about emotions, that's more dangerous than talking about religion or politics. Well, we intend to take the lid off, to take the mask off of people. And one thing that we have done is begin the process by learning sachets: sad, angry, scared, happy, excited, tender. Today we're going to deal with copied emotions, where people will identify with somebody else and carry their emotion in their own body. I'm going to deal with three people: Ed, Joan, and Richard. Remember that we are about soul healing. We want to return somebody back to the beautiful soul that they had as an infant in a natural situation. Ed was an executive at an advertising agency in downtown Chicago. And when he came in, he said that he had bouts of real sadness. Now, with my diagnostic and statistical manual mind, I thought bipolar. And at that time, the major medicine was lithium. But I said, tell me about it, Ed. Give me an example of when you felt real sad. He said, well, I went to a basketball game of Chicago Bulls. Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan were playing, and I knew they would be able to beat Detroit. So I was real excited. I felt great. And I was in there a while, and all of a sudden I felt dismally sad. I said, now break it down slide by slide for me, Ed. And he said, well, I went in, I was okay. I got me some stuff to eat. And then I started looking around, and I saw a real sad woman. And he said, I just got absorbed with her. And then I felt just very sad. So I said, tell me more about your life, Ed. I'm beginning to understand. And he said, well, his wife was leaving him, and everything else was going good. But sometimes he would just have these bouts of sadness. I said, tell me about your selection process for your wife. And he said, well, I saw her. We were in college together, and she was sitting on a bench, and she looked very, very sad. And I wanted to help her. And I said, that's interesting. Now tell me about you and your mother. And he said, well, my mother would have bouts of sadness, so maybe it's genetic. And I said, well, give me an example way back when she was real sad. And he said, when I was 4 years of age, I saw that she was sad. I became sad myself, and she perked up and started helping me. So I knew that I could help her by feeling her sadness. Now we're getting a really important thing here in terms of 4-year-old grandiosity, which I'll return to in a subsequent lecture. I said, you know, Ed, when you take on the sufferings of somebody else, you become the Christ. You become the person who bears the sins of the world, and what happens is that you're going to get crucified. And they only have 3 nails. I was always looking for right-wing ways to express something to catch the mind of the person. So in a lot of sessions, Ed began to realize that he was not going to identify with somebody who had sadness, nor was he going to try to save them like he had his mother and his wife. So we had a very good therapy session. Let's move to person 2, Joan. She came in. She looked like $1 million. She had excellent clothes on, beautiful hair. Came in to my office, and I said, what's going on? After we had talked for a while. established a little bit of basic rapport. And I might say that by now I've already understood a lot about her, because my wife and I believed in kinesthetic identification, and so I copied her body, copied her breathing, copied her mannerisms, not only for rapport, but for knowing what was going on inside of her. And I had a sense that she was concave. She was bent in some way. And she told me she was empty, and I could feel it in her body. Now, I knew here again a developmental insight that this emptiness and this concaveness that I sense reflected back to the first 6 months of life, and there was not a good attachment. So an attachment means the mother is holding the baby and loving the baby and feeding the baby and being very considerate about the child, changing it, keeping it warm, etc. And she said that her mother was deceased, and I said, well, I want you to go, do you have an aunt? Yeah, she said, my mother's sister is alive, Aunt Ellen. I said, well, go see Aunt Ellen and ask her about your first 6 months in life. And so she did, and Aunt Ellen told her that her mother had postpartum depression, and that while she had helped and gone over to do some mothering for Joan when she was a baby, the fact was that her mother was not into taking care of a baby. And frequently, Joan just laid there, untaken care of, hungry, just a lump of flesh, clay. And Ellen said that she was sorry about that. So now we had clear data to go on. And I finally said to Joan, Joan, you don't have a problem. Your mother had a problem. And you, as a baby, copied her problem. And you have been an imitator, and you have, like a infant does, stuck close to your mother, but you imitated her sadness. It took several years of working with Joan for her to have the entire spectrum of sad, angry, scared, happy, excited, tender. Now I want to go to the third person, excuse me, Richard. And here I refer to somebody that was not a client. When I was on the south side of Chicago as a minister in 1966, on July 13 to be exact, Richard Speck killed 8 nurses across the street from the church. It wasn't 150 feet from the church. And I happened to go, and I heard it on the radio, and I went and I watched these gurneys going out of this apartment with the dead bodies of 8 nurses. The sheets were blood-soaked because Richard Speck had gone in there and had killed these nurses individually with a knife. He had them upstairs, and they went along with him, and he tied them up, and then he'd bring them down one at a time, rape them, and then knife them to death. So I was in my learning mode and of psychoanalysis, and so I studied Richard Speck's childhood. His mother was a real syrupy, holier-than-thou Christian. She knew all the right words. She prayed without ceasing. In other words, she was a very passive-aggressive person. She didn't know anger. She didn't have the sachet balanced in her life. And if you've ever lived with anybody or been around somebody who is very passive-aggressive, that is, very secret ways to show anger, you'll discover that after a while you want to break glass, you want to scream, you want to kick something. Well, this woman, Richard Speck's mother, was married twice. And her first husband, she had a bunch of kids, but her first husband would beat up on Richard. And he died, she married again, and her second husband would beat up on Richard and would also sexually abuse him. And Richard was like some battery that keeps ticking. He would come back again and be beat up by this man. So I learned his childhood. Freud said that if in a brutalizing situation, a person will imitate the aggressor. They'll incorporate in their body the aggressor. In other words, they've copied the emotions of the aggressor. And certainly, Richard Speck, and he had a police record over the years, had copied the aggressor. He had beaten women, and he had killed a few before the 8 nurses. Now, we've been dealing with the fact that all sachet is not created equal. There are copied emotions, and with the right questions and with the right observations, we can learn even more about this human animal, what they're hiding under their shell, their mask that they're wearing. And Richard Speck is a wonderful illustration, sick illustration, but he's an illustration of pathology and the absorption or the copying of someone else's emotions. And I watched what happened to Richard Speck in the jail. And again, he acted out and was brutalized, sexually abused. He actually took hormones to grow breasts. There's a movie on him on YouTube. It's a sick situation. But here we are learning that sachet is copied. We've got several phylum now, real emotions and copied emotions. And we'll continue in a little while with other phyla of emotions.